You're allowed to go.
Thank you. I'd like to call to order Environmental Concerns and Real Property Tax Services Committee meeting. I am Claudia Kramer, and we have a quorum here. Can I have a motion to approve the minutes of the last meeting? Supervisor McGowan, second by Supervisor Gerasi. All in favor, please say aye. Opposed, changes, abstention, that carries. Thank you. Privilege of the floor. Is there anybody who wants to speak to us before we get started? And if not, we are going to go right into Jim Labrum for a presentation about soil and water initiatives. Jim, you are up.
Want me to just do it right from here?
No, go to the podium, please, in case people are watching from Zoom or YouTube. Thank you.
So thanks for having me here today. I think most of you know me, but I'm Jim Lieber from the Warren County Soil and Water Conservation District. We're a conservation agency. We do a lot of projects. I was just talking to Amanda Allen about how everybody except my office manager is out of the office at the moment working on a variety of different things. So Claudia asked me if I would talk a little bit if we had any background in harmful algal blooms and other water quality aspects. And I said, sure. So put together a brief presentation on what is cyanobacteria, also known as harmful algal blooms. These are things which have come up in the newspaper with some regularity over the past few years, and more people are aware of them. So they're also called blue-green algae blooms. So we can go ahead and go to the next slide. Of course, I asked Tammy when she left. So, all right. So the first thing to understand is blue-green algae is a natural occurrence. They're in every mud puddle, every lake. They've been there. We refer to it as they're the primordial ooze that formed the world. So they've been there. They always will be there. So they're actually not algae, but scientists lump them in and call them blue-green algae. They're called cyanobacteria. In the Lake George study, they were discovered, way back in 1922. So they've been part of the ecosystem since beginning of time, but we accepted that they were there in the 20s. And there's a number of different kinds, and just the shapes of some of them you see. Go ahead. You know this there, that. So what drives algal blooms? First of all, it's season. That's a big thing. Depending on what we're evaluating, what the chart you see on the right, there's something called diatoms. Everybody has experienced diatoms if you've gone into a river or a stream. They're the brown colored, I don't want to say slime in any bad way, but it's the gelatinous, slimy kind of thing that makes you slip. Those are diatoms. They're a type of algae. You find those earlier in the spring, then you transition to a green algae. Then our blue algae, which is what we're looking at today, is usually a late summer type of event. And then we have diatoms again towards the wintertime. So algae, that's what's taking up nutrients, taking up phosphorus, and it's just part of our systems. Go ahead. So there is a difference. You can have, again, cyanobacteria in any water body, and you do, but there's a difference between that and a harmful algal bloom. Basically, what happens is when you have situations as in the images there, this paint-like looking material, you most likely have a harmful algal bloom. And if it's in late July, August, September, October even, we're having a change in our seasons, as far as temperature and lengthening of summer and a warm fall. And these are things which help contribute to the growth of these. There's also a difference between a harmful algal bloom and a harmful algal bloom with toxicity. And we'll hit a slide on that in a second. But it can have, you can affect people, fish, shellfish, animals, and birds. The first time I ever heard of HABs really came from Lake Champlain up in Missisquoi Bay, where every year one or two dogs would die of ingesting this toxin. That was not something they lapped up specifically, what was on their coat, and they would lick it and then they would ingest it and they would die. So that drove a lot of, hey, what's going on here? So what causes harmful algal blooms? Basically the same thing as any type of algal bloom, whether it's harmful or not. You have the right recipe of excess nutrients, phosphorus and nitrogen primarily. Phosphorus in freshwater systems is called the limiting nutrient. So our systems need phosphorus up to a certain point. And when we exceed that level of contribution in phosphorus, then that's where we have not just algal blooms, but people will complain about we have too much growth in our lake of plants. And the supervisors here deal with that frequently. Not all, having a lot of plants isn't bad. A lot of it is our perception of what is good and bad. But we have excess nutrients from nature. We have it from stormwater runoff, from potentially failing septic systems, wastewater systems. So whenever we're pumping any kind of runoff from the surface into our lakes and ponds, it accumulates. And the problem is it doesn't leave. Phosphorus doesn't leave. It can change chemically. It can get locked up in the sediments, but it doesn't go away. The only way to get rid of it really is to physically dredge it out and remove it. So once we have it in the system, it's in the system. Low water or low flow conditions. So if you remember that bell curve for harmful algal blooms or blue-green algae, it was in August, September, our low time of the year for water. Also, usually the highest temperature of the water. So it's just a lot of productivity. A good example, if you wanted to see it, check out Skinny Atlas Lake. That's what drove this probably about 7-8 years ago. A lot of this understanding, a lot of science that's been coming out. Skinny Atlas Lake is the water supply for the city of Syracuse, and it had a tremendous outbreak of harmful algal blooms. I'm not sure if, I have a feeling there were toxins involved in it, because within a month or two, New York State allocated $10 or $20 million to a water filtration plant there. So when you're dealing with a population of 200,000 people, it's something you need to take seriously as a health concern. Calm waters, what happened out in Skinny Atlas was it was a period of that still, that calm, and then they had 4 or 5 inches of rain in a short duration, came down the steep hillsides in Skinny Atlas Lake, introduced sediment, which is where your phosphorus and nitrogen is, and just created this wonderful mechanism to have a harmful algal bloom. So it depends on the weather characteristics of the lake. Lake George has experienced some HABs, Friends Lake, Loon Lake, Glen Lake, 1 or 2 other lakes in our county. There's actually a DEC reporting mechanism, which I have a slide on. But if anybody was interested in the lakes and how many, I'd be glad to send that to the board for dissemination. So what can we do? Well, as I said, you can't, unless you're dredging everything, you're not going to remove the phosphorus. So the idea is to try to improve what's going in there as much as possible. And that's why it's important that Warren County DPW, all the town highway departments, whether you're doing stuff with us or the regional planning board or internally, to reduce that type of runoff, because we're just continually introducing material which is going to potentially exacerbate the issues. It's interesting. I was at a conference years ago in Las Vegas, and we went to Lake Mead, and obviously they've had a lot of water issues there. They do the opposite. They're like, we don't want any water going into the ground. We want it all to go to Lake Mead. So they would line their ditches with concrete so they could capture all of the water and put it into the lake. So it's fascinating how we manage things depending on the soils and the area that we're in the country. But really, a couple, the mayors were just here. One of the big things on Lake George was the upgrade to the wastewater treatment plant on Lake George. So that's one thing. It's something like I'm looking at Supervisor Garassi. Obviously you don't have a wastewater treatment plant on Bright Lake, and my guess is never will. But that's why obviously awareness of septic systems, maintenance, things like that is extremely important. You want to keep up with it, and trust me, I know Nobody wants to deal with septics because it's not like if Mike here is taking and building a new garage, hey, you got a new garage, put stuff in. Putting in a new septic. You can't see anything. It doesn't seem to be as powerful. So it's a perception thing, but it's very important. So, all right, next. And again, this is what a bloom looks like. It looks like paint. That's the best way to describe it. I won't have you click on the video because I'm not sure the link is actually active right now. I can send the link. It's out in a lake in Texas, and you can actually see this enormous HAB that comes into a boat launch area, and you can just see it's timed. It's through videography, and it's fascinating to watch. A lot of it is with the wave action, but it goes in and just spreads out, just like a little kid pouring something into the water, just spreads right out. And there again, you have potential impacts. Not all cyanobacteria are capable of producing toxins. Obviously, the list is too small to see, but there is research that shows that kidney diseases, respiratory illnesses, things like that, because this bacteria is releasing a toxin. And I'm not highly susceptible to bee stings, but maybe Supervisor McGowan is. So everybody reacts differently with that type of introduction into your body. But just so you know, there are a lot of bad things that can happen with cyanobacteria. There's a reporting methodology. It's pretty straightforward. If anybody comes across what they think is a HAB, you're welcome to go online to the DEC or call our office. Bob Bombard from our office has assisted, I'm going to say 30, 40 people in the last few years just navigating through the website. And it's important to get this information out there. It's important for the science, but it's also important so that those communities that the lakes are in and that we rely on for economic stability are identified so that funding can be allocated through different grants and support to get those problems resolved. Because and you've heard me say this, you heard me say this last Friday at the MS4 closeout, our financial resources are what supports our county. I strongly believe that. And so what do we do? Most people think, most people know us because of the tree and shrub seedling program, but it's expanded beyond that. We actually do monitoring and sampling of different things out there. Thanks to the county, we received 2 ARPA funding applications. One was for a weather station. So that is established at our office. We're working on getting that up on a dashboard so everybody can just view it instead of subscribing to it. We also are going to be placing a water monitoring station in Lake Sunnyside and Glen Lake because they are part of the MS4 community for the county and the town of Queensbury. And they're going to be looking at, as I have here, basically the same things, but relative humidity, barometric pressure, rainfall, water level, and temperature. And that will be available on a dashboard as well. That the samplers in Glen Lake and Lake Sunnyside are going to be through a collaborative with Paul Smith's College Adirondack Watershed Institute. We conduct outfall sampling for the MS4 in urban areas, for City of Glens Falls, for Lake George, for Queensbury, and for the county. So we go out there, and that's the sampling that we will do. Private ponds, if somebody has a private pond, Supervisor Thomas knows Bob will go out there and take the probe that we have and give an instant reading. And it's not going to say this is what you need to do for the rest of your pond's life, but it's, hey, here's the way to start and what you have to look at as far as monitoring. Are there any potential concerns at this specific point in time? And the Glens Falls water supply. We have an agreement with the City of Glens Falls. We go out once a month from April to October. And we actually go out in the city watersheds and do that same type of sampling. And we did find a HAB last year occurring, and it was reported. And at the same time, there was a couple individuals walking from a public trail onto the Glens Falls watershed property. And a young person allowed their dog to go down into the reservoir and start wallowing around in it. And we advised her that there was a harmful algal bloom going on and that you're not allowed to be in this water. The response was, well, I don't think you're supposed to be voting on it. And our response was, well, City of Glens Falls has allowed us to do this. So public perception is a challenge at times. So, we're out there on a lot of different things, doing a lot of different type of monitoring and sampling. And then following up with that, we do a lot of planning work and implementation work to reduce the impacts, and whether they're continual impact, roadside ditch that's eroding up in the town of Chester, putting sediment down in Chester Creek, increasing the amount of material in the water, increasing the amount of nutrients in that water, we can address that. So that would be a short-term thing. Long-term planning, stabilization work, habitat work ties in, because really if we can tie in some positive aspects, believe it or not, that those are turtles all on a log in Pond 1 of the Westbrook Conservation Initiative. Probably majority of people have no idea that's a stormwater management tool down there, but they know that they can go down to Pond 1 and see turtles all the time and bring their grandkids and their kids. And you know what? I'm good with that because everything gets accomplished and everybody's happy. And I'm happy because I can go home and I don't have to deal with a lot of things beyond it. So, but we deal with culverts, stormwater reduction improvements, hazard mitigation, as you know, because I've been pestering you. And that's the last slide that I have. So, if you have any questions about what we do as far as water quality, we do a wide variety of things. That's how we really started back. The Soil and Water District in Warren County has been around since, I meant to look this up, 60 some years now, I believe it or not. I've been there for 25 years and we've diversified the amount of programs and offerings that we have. So always feel free to reach out to myself. There's very few things that we won't handle. Even when Mayor Hall was in the city of Glens Falls, I love it. And I tell this the fact of what won't we do? Not very much, because he called me and said, hey, Jen, usually I have our fire chief deal with this, but this is up your alley. You have my attention, Mayor Hall. We have a dead rattlesnake. Yes, you definitely have my attention. So we dealt with that. Why? Because Bob Bombard from my office used to work at the Darren Freshwater Institute with Bill Brown, who was the snake biologist for the DEC. And guess what? We got the dead snake back to him, and he did the autopsy. So we do a lot of different things. Frank can attest to that. I see him smirking there. He never knows what he's going to hear at our monthly board meeting. So with that, I would entertain any questions.
Jim, you are a tremendous resource at doing all these wonderful things in our county, and we thank you so much for all that you're doing, and thank you for your time and being here today. Supervisor McGowan, Supervisor Leggett is first, then I'll come back to you, Greg.
Madam Chair. Jim, you have a picture of Friends like you did the watershed management study for them. There have been HABs reported on the lake, and people are concerned that where they'll show up is the area of where there would be any non-point source pollution, the phosphorus loading or whatever it may be. Is that true, or can they pop up anywhere?
They can pop up anywhere. Some of the research that's being done in Lake George is going beyond, just what we deal with. But if you think of it, you have the lake, and everybody has swum in lakes, and not specifically ponds, but lakes. They develop kind of their own current system in different areas. In a large lake, you might have an embayment where a lot of the water stays because the heating of the water, cooling the water, different densities of the water. So you could have an HAB occur anywhere in the lake. However, where there is a point of a source, it probably would be more likely. So the nice thing with Friends Lake, you don't actually have a lot of roadside issues. It's relatively not impacted that way. There are some. So, if you came to me and said, oh, what do you think our greatest source of nutrients would be from? It could either be natural, because there's a lot of drainage that goes into that. Forests decompose, as you know, put phosphorus and nitrogen in the water, but also septics, unmaintained septics or improperly installed septics. It's just basic. This is where it's going to be coming from.
Thank you.
Supervisor McGowan.
Yeah, thank you. Joe, once again, always love
your lectures, your speeches,
Fireside.
very informative. Sitting on the Queensbury Planning Board, you know, we really, on a lot of these lake projects, and I've gotten to the point now where, you know, I'm really looking at the, foot ratio to the property. Because these people are buying these small things and trying to jam everything up there, and you're not getting the proper, you know, stormwater retainage that you're looking for. But the other thing that was, you know, we've also gone for things, planning and stuff like this. Now, one of the things that we've really started looking into, and really a lot of help from you and coming and seeing us, but you know, in these planning, people put in mulch or, you know, mulch. Now, might as well just have your mountainside wooded area just flowing into the lake then, because of the, you know, decomposing the phosphorus and nitrates that come off of that. So, you know, we contributed it to our forests around that puts it in the lake. And I believe the humans kind of add a little more.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
That you know, and this, and now that the temperatures have just come up and 2 degrees makes a big difference on growing things. So, you know, so I know Queensbury, we're really trying to remind people what you put in there, you know, no mulch, we're asking for no more mulch, you know, anything there. You know, but talking and trying to stop any water from going into the lake is our goal. So
Yeah, the best thing is to basically try to go back to pre-construction conditions, which for most of our county, we have very well draining soils. So if we can get it back draining through the soil, that's preferred. But the fact of the matter is parts of our county have been developed for 300 years. That's not going to happen. So we have to adjust as best we can. And you heard me say before, you know, the incremental victories, that's how we're going to get there. You have to work here, work here, work here. You know, we received a planning grant last year. We put in last year for the city of Glens Falls on behalf of the water department. They asked if we would put in for it was a $30,000 planning grant. They have a problem over at the Sanford Street area. Water from all the way over at the high school flows that way, but I believe it's about 110 acres of city drains to Sanford Street, and then it goes up to Bowman and outlets there. And that stream is what goes to the old pond on the corner of Garrison, and then flows up past Duke, and then goes out by Minogues and goes into Halfway Brook. So everything's connected. So they're having problems. So we're going to be working with them and their consultant to find areas that water can be infiltrated or retained long enough to create benefits down the line, not just an end of the pipe solution. Because if we can get it back into the ground, we're going to be better off. So, but yeah.
All right.
I don't want to take up any
Thank
time.
you. Jim, you and your office and Bob are always available, and we appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Lexi, let's switch over to the real property attendant.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, so first thing that we have on the agenda is under the action agenda, new business. Included in your packet was a resolution request amending the delinquent tax property foreclosure procedures regarding the last chance meeting, also the timetable for the foreclosure and auction. There was 2 prepared resolutions just to kind of, I think, be able to give you some options. I know that the county attorney is the one that worked on drafting these. We did have some discussion about these. There was 2 prior resolutions, 104 and 105 of 2020, that these would be either changing, rescinding, or amending, if I'm saying that all right. I'm not sure if anybody looked at this stuff ahead of time.
So basically, there's two here, two different options, but
Correct.
obviously the first one is a lot more straightforward and simplifies the process.
Yeah, the first one is establishing a new timetable for the delinquent property tax foreclosure and of course the auction. And pull up my other two resolutions. So
And these two are, can be acted on, what they're not.
one or the other, they don't have to be both. If I'm,
It should not be both.
it should not be
It's
both.
either or.
They are kind of mutually exclusive, okay?
So on the one, it would be removing the last chance meeting. So resolution 105 was the timetable that had the last chance meeting still in at that time. We are considering doing away with the last chance meeting. We do have other measures for people to still come forward because we do offer installment agreements to people that can enter into installment agreements if they're behind in their taxes. So that is another option. The last chance meeting, I don't know how many of you have attended, but they, some years there's a lot of people, some years there's not. And some of them are difficult because people want to come and they want to, tell you their whole entire story of why they're there and what happened. And then there's others that are easier. These people still do have the option of entering into installment agreements. However, at the last chance meeting, we've also had a lot of repetitive people that we've dealt with year after year. People that have come to us and said, I don't have the money. Can you give me more time? We give them more time. They still don't pay, or we give them more time and they enter into an installment agreement, or they come up with the money to pay. The last chance meeting a few years back, we bumped it from August to July to kind of help the attorney's office be able to prepare going forward with getting ready to file the motion with the courts to foreclose on the properties. So July just seemed like a better timetable. So I don't know. I can only make a recommendation, but it's really comes down to your call.
Question.
Supervisor Drossy.
Yeah, question. Are you aware of how many counties approximately have a last chance process?
To my knowledge, no other county offers this option across New York State. We have had some other counties reach out to us and say, I can't believe that you're doing this. How can you go ahead and give these people another last chance? I mean, we have a specific set by law day to use for the last day to redeem. And if we're setting a last day to redeem, then why are we giving a last chance meeting to give them 2 more months or to pull them out and give them another year to come back to us? Bear in mind that when these taxes aren't paid, all the other taxpayers are still paying their taxes and making up the difference. You all still have to raise the same levy every year. So by people not paying, that money comes out of the county's coffers to make your towns whole when people don't pay their taxes. And then the county is at a loss for money, to make up these taxes as well.
Supervisor McGowan.
It's brought up the Christian family, and you always try to do the best. And, this is a tough thing. I don't like that last chance. People see that and they push that envelope a little bit further. Well, we can't make the payments on this 3rd time, so we'll wait till the last chance. And I was there at the meeting, when the attorney said, Chief, you got to give me more time. So we did bump it up. But going through the whole process, these tax, I feel sorry for them. I do. But on the other hand, too, I also feel sorry for the rest of us. We do whatever we have to pay our taxes, even when things, being self-employed, not every year has been a great year for me, I've had to find some money because I have my obligations. So. It's a tough one, what do? You can't. I can't think from the heart, which I normally try to do, so. I just don't like the last chance meeting because people see that and they're gonna say, well, we got one more chance. I say, for the process, the election has an order and all the notifications that go out. If you can't make it by the last one, then I'm sorry.
I think it is a tough call, this one. This is a recommendation being brought to us from Lexi and our county attorney. And I do want to say, since Mr. Brock was the supervisor of this committee, even then, we started working on trying to provide more notification. Lexi has a spreadsheet of people that she contacts to make sure that they know, payments are due, get into an installment agreement. She's helping. And over the last several years, the number of people who come to the last chance meeting has been very much whittled down. So Supervisor Gerasi.
I'd make a motion to eliminate the last chance meeting.
So going with that first resolution behind the request form, the one that has the 1, 2, 3 bullet points.
Yeah.
So we put it up for discussion if there's a second. Supervisor McGowan. Okay. Mr. Elman, do you want to speak to this at all? Or would you prefer that I?
Real briefly, that's the difference between the two draft resolutions, and they're only in the packet to provide some guidance and idea. One is Warren County is no longer the only county that we know of that does this process and procedure. And that's option one. Or option two, if you were to keep it, you would have to move it much, much earlier before the last day to redeem, because we're creating a legal inconsistency, which I think creates some liability on the county and maybe has for many years in the past. There's nothing in the statute that provides, requires, suggests, encourages any county or other taxing jurisdiction to have this last chance meeting. Warren County adopted it, it appears, many, many years ago. They've used it for a significant period of time. But this is brought forth because, my recommendation is, from a legal perspective, that we not have it anymore going forward. With the backup position being is if there's a strong push that we have to keep this tool in place, then it has to occur before the last day to redeem, because the last day to redeem means it's the last day to redeem. It can't be 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 6 weeks after that, because then the last day to redeem is maybe the last day to redeem, but not necessarily if the last chance committee gives you a last chance, even though the time period statutorily has expired. So last year being my first year through the actual foreclosure process, I was a little stumped when we got to the last chance meeting after the redemption date. But here we are. I'd rather not repeat that process again going forward as a legal recommendation to the board. So it puts the county much more in compliance with what we call the in rem procedure. And then there's a much bigger issue that's brewing out there in the Supreme Court and in the New York State Legislature about this entire process and what's going to happen in the next probably 30 days, where it could look tremendously different than anything that we did in the past. So my legal recommendation is that we go with the first option that's in your packet, which really doesn't change the prior dates. It just removes all references to this last chance meeting.
Just a second, but Treasurer Swan had his hand up, so I just want to give him the privilege of the floor without objection.
Okay.
Yep. Yes.
First of all, I just want to say that I've been a proponent for years of either eliminating or moving the last chance meeting prior to the last day to redeem. In my humble opinion, I'm not an attorney, but I always felt that that was quite legal to have the last chance meeting after the last day to redeem. State law says we have the option to set that last day to redeem, and you're not supposed to collect afterwards. I do have a question though for the county attorney. There is the resolution out there that grants my office, me specifically, the ability to extend past the last day to redeem to the last day of July. Does this resolution eliminate that?
The drafts do not, but I would ask that it would be incorporated into a motion so that the last day to redeem for Warren County under the statutes is actually the last day to redeem.
Okay, all right.
And I apologize. I didn't think of that when we were prepping these papers. I know we've had that exact conversation about the last chance meeting last year. So I apologize to the treasurer for not connecting the dots on that second.
Well, that's fine. I just want to make sure that we address that, because if we're changing the last chance meeting, then we got to make sure that we address that authority that was granted to me. The only other comment I have to make is that and no offense to you, county attorney, but it's kind of at the last minute. We have been dealing with delinquent taxpayers since January, okay? And they come to us, what can we do? What can we do? And not that we tell them about the last chance meeting or that there is an extension possible. Some of them know it. We're going to be changing this, I would assume, at the board meeting in June. So that's about, 4 weeks away from the actual last day to redeem. It makes it a little difficult for our office because my staff has always worked under how the old rules were. It would be nicer if we could change it to effect 24, but we'll make it work. That would be my only thought on that. The other side of it is that, and I've said this for years, sometimes bad things happen to good people. And that's why Lexi does what she does. That's why my office has the installment agreements. That's why I spend a lot of time talking with these people to try to make sure that those people don't fall through the cracks, that sometimes bad things happen to good people. And I don't think anybody in this room wants to punish those type of people. We want to make sure that, they're given every opportunity to make good on what's happened to them. On the other side, what I call our repeat offenders, and we have quite a few of those that every year I'm dealing with them. I mean, I joke about this, but when Lexi and I go out and talk to these people, it's like, hey, Mike, how you doing? Hey, how are the kids, Charlie? Because we're there every year. Those are the ones that take advantage of the system and use the last chance meeting and my extensions to prolong this. And the last point, I think last year it was a 5-point-something million amount of money that the county gave to the towns and the school districts to make them whole. And then we have to go out and collect that from the people who pay their taxes. That puts a dent in our cash flow. Anybody got a question for me on this?
Thank you for your office's work too, Mike, for reaching out to people. I was remiss in not mentioning that too. You definitely do help people. Brad, and then non-committee members who want to speak, I will.
Thank you again. I just wanted to say, I know how hard Lexi works at notifying, and her heart is in what she does too. And she does reach out to the fullest, along with Mike Swan, trying to, get these people up. And it makes me feel more comfortable saying, let's take it out, because, enough's enough.
Supervisor McDevitt.
As Treasurer Swan said, bad things happen to good people at times. I'm going to oppose the the motion put forward to eliminate the last chance meeting. I think people ought to be given every opportunity to, and does it create some issues, more work internally? Well, it just does, but I believe that homeowners that are fall into a situation like this should be given every opportunity to pay their debts.
Did other supervisors
January to July.
want to say something?
7 months.
You don't have to. I just know you had your hand up earlier. Yes, please.
Sorry.
No need to apologize.
Thank you very much. Treasurer Slime hit on most of what I was going to say, but a question for you, Lexi. On the percentage of people that are habitual abusers of the process versus the bad things to good people, what's the percentage that you see every year? Do you know?
That's a hard call, because you can't base it per year, because say somebody goes into an installment agreement, they got 2 years to pay. Depending on when they go in, if they catch themselves up to a certain point, then they just turn around and let themselves go until the following year, and then they got to catch themselves back up. But at that point, now they would need to enter back into another agreement because they've already let the other years go. So part of the thing that a lot of people don't understand with like installment agreements, for example, we allow these people to enter into installment agreements. They sign these documents when they enter an installment agreement. And in that paperwork, it also states that you were supposed to keep all of your subsequent taxes current. So you're entering, if you're in a home, usually it's 4 years of taxes that you're entering into an installment agreement for, because it's 3 years before we start the foreclosure. We foreclose in the 4th year. So more than likely it's 4 years of taxes that are delinquent. So they go into this installment agreement and don't pay their current taxes, even though the agreement that they sign says you have to keep your subsequent taxes current. At that point, when they don't do that, that paperwork says that we can start the foreclosure process at any time for them. We don't. That's another option that we've given to these people. They don't make their payments and we don't move forward with the foreclosure. But as for your question for the percentage, it's really hard for me to answer that. It could be 25% one year, it could be 50% another. It's really hard to say. I mean, when I go through those lists year after year, I know those names. I mean, I know those names. We're either out posting or they've been in installment agreements time and time and time again. And that's what a lot of people do. They go into an installment agreement. They pay usually by the 3rd year, even though they're only granted 2 years to pay. The 3rd year, they're still paying on their installment agreement because they got to pay it off before the last day to redeem. But then they turn around and then the following year, they got to enter back into another installment agreement because they kept nothing current.
Do we need to tighten up the language of our installment agreements?
Well, it's there. It's not that we need to tighten up the language. I think we would need to tighten up the procedure as to, do we want to, every time somebody defaults on their installment agreement, do we want to start an individual foreclosure process? That's going to create a tremendous amount of work for the county attorney's office because it's not one, it's multiples. And
The other thing is your question made me think about how many times in the last 5 years of auctions have we sold a home, a residence that was actually somebody's home that they were living in? And I'm going to say in the last 5 years, maybe 3.
yeah, very few.
We've sold several that were people were renting in the house, okay, or vacant. But I bet you in the last 5 years, 3.
Max.
That somebody, it was actually their home that they were living in that they could not come up with the taxes. So we're not real bad, we're just a little bad.
Thank you.
Supervisor Leggett and then Tracy, then I think we'll have a question.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chairwoman. 2 things for us to consider. One is their safety valve. Once we institute the procedure here, it's set in law, that we follow those rules. Is there enough safety valve in there for those folks, good people, bad situation, to be able to save their homes? And it seems like there is. Tell me if it's otherwise. And the last day to redeem is like the last chance. Is there something other at the last chance meetings? Is there some sort of forbearance that sometimes goes where we just wave and say, forget going into foreclosure at all, and we pull it out of that whole system? That would be different than what anybody could do before the last day to redeem.
So at last year's last chance meeting, we had nine properties, 4 properties by one person, or should I say one family, multiple owners. Let's see, we removed 1, 2, 3, and then the other 4. We removed 7 properties at that last chance meeting and gave these people a chance to pay. One person who was going through a divorce.
Can I just interrupt, because I don't think, for sake of time, don't need a lot of detail on this, just on the general thing.
Yes, the answer is yes. We pull people out, and legally we probably shouldn't be doing that after the last day to redeem.
Right, and hold
I
on.
think that's the answer to your question.
Finish while I regain my.
Okay. So we pulled out. One woman actually sold the property and paid. We had another individual that has still not paid. We have another one that did not pay. And then the one that was owned by the multiple family members, there was 4 of them. They have now caused even more confusion because there was such a divide in the family. They have sold to different parties. And so one party now has 60% of those 4 and the other has 40, but nobody has come forward to still pay those taxes. So even though you give these people these extra chances, what are you giving them? Another chance to hang on to their property for another year, but they still don't come and pay their tax. So you have to consider that as well. You know, I understand, because trust me, I make numerous phone calls to people, not just for people that are in defaulted installment agreement, other people when I'm going across the list, because that's what I'm working on now, is producing the maps that I need to go out and actually post at these properties. And I'm like, oh, hey, you know, I think I have a number for this person from before, and I go and call them, or I go on and find numbers for people and reach out to them. So, you know.
Once you go to their house.
Do, and the county attorney's office mails the petitions out in April every year. Those petitions go out, everybody gets noticed, plus lien holders.
Or actually do what's not required before we even get to that phase in the fall, and we send courtesy letters to every single delinquent taxpayer whose property may be going into the foreclosure action the following year, to give them multiple months heads up of what's coming down the road. All of those processes are great, because when you do look at the numbers, at least for last year, the number you start with and the number that actually end up on a judgment of foreclosure, it's a tremendous amount of work that the treasurer's office and the director of real property tax services puts in to reduce an enormous number down to 30. Down to what it's a number of properties, and when you look at what the properties are, they tend to be vacant, abandoned properties. At least a majority of them were last year.
Supervisor Gerasi, and I think Supervisor McGowan made the second. Are you willing to amend your motion to add that language about eliminating?
I have 2 related questions first, quick questions. So the treasurer said we've only foreclosed on 3 properties. We actually sold 3 properties.
Let me just help everybody clarify a little bit on the process. The foreclosure process ends when the Supreme Court judge signs a judgment of foreclosure. That judgment of foreclosure legally directs the treasurer as the taxing authority to execute a deed, basically, I don't want to say to himself, but to the treasurer and to the county. And it's when that judgment is entered, really the foreclosure action more or less is done. The auction that occurs is not part of the foreclosure process. It's the method the county uses under the statute to take these properties that the county now has title to quickly sell them in a way that's approved under New York State statute. So I think it's very easy because people are used to the bank foreclosures and the judicial foreclosures is what they're called, where one of the last steps is a court monitored foreclosure auction. This in rem tax foreclosure process is very different because the end result is giving the county title to the property, not auctioning it. Auctioning it is just the next thing the county does once it has to take title to recover taxes.
So I'm trying to get an idea.
Just to, so they don't understand, I hate to interrupt, but Lexi's auction usually sells average 40-45 properties a year, 50, somewhere in there.
30 to 40.
30-40, okay. Of that group, what I was saying was over the last 5 years, we have only sold at auction 3 out of the last 5 years, 3 properties that actually had somebody living in them that it was their home, out of those 40 or 50 or 35 that we auction every year.
All right, thank you. That answers that part of the question. Second part is, if we wait 4 years, it's 3 years of non-tax.
3 years for residential, 2 years for commercial and vacant
So we're
property.
talking about residential.
So it would be the 4th
What
year.
is the incentive for these non-taxpayers? If they know it's going to be 4 years, what's the incentive to pay the tax?
Will for
Interest and penalties.
and interest and penalties every year.
They could care less.
Right, but at that point, at some point, they have to pay in order to save their property. But there's a lot of people that don't, like you say, they let it go and then all of a sudden they go, oh, hey, I owe you money. Right now, there's a place out on Crown Island, right out in front of the Sagamore, that's in our foreclosure for this year. I personally got the guy's phone number because he was in an installment agreement before from the treasurers. I didn't have to do that, but I did as a courtesy and reached out and called and left them a message just the other day. Because who wants to lose a property with that value just because you owe taxes?
With all of your experience, was any doubt in your mind that there's a difference between people who are taking advantage of the system and, as was described, bad things happen to good people? There's a difference there,
Yeah.
right? So for this group of non-taxpayers who just abuse the system, they could care less. What is it that we can do to move this forward, to get their attention? In less than 4 years, I think that's ridiculous.
Right. I say that we call it like it should be, and that we do away with the last chance meeting and we leave it with the last day to redeem is the last day to redeem. Like I said, I go through my list. I have a thing on my computer where I go in and I try to find people in all ways, shapes, and forms to get a phone number, and I will reach out to people. I mean, I've been doing that since I've been the
I'm gonna
director.
interrupt you. I think that what you're asking is a little slightly different question than just getting rid of the last day of, last chance meeting. You want to know for those ones that have already been in the foreclosure, how can we move that process up? And I think that we can look at whether there are anything that we can do, but part of it is a judicial proceeding that we can't just speed up. They're entitled to certain notices, they're entitled to,
But is it a
they're
4-year process? Is it a legal 4-year process?
Not necessarily, but the county, this is going into a whole different area that I have an issue with that is unrelated to what is before the committee today. But we also do not follow the statutory timetable for starting these actions. Because we don't start them January 1st, we delay the start of them so that we can time the last day to redeem to be in the summer rather than in the early spring. And that was a decision made, I suspect, decades ago, probably with some very good reasons, why it was important to give taxpayers some portion of the summer season to pay their
I understand,
property taxes.
the balance of the taxpayers that are coming up with their taxes on an annual basis are being taken advantage of.
But this gets me back to the calling of the question on what we have in front of us today.
All right, so I made the original one.
Yeah, and are you okay with eliminating the treasurer's authority? Because it won't really be relevant anymore.
Yes.
Brad? Okay. So we'll add that language to the resolution as it goes to the board.
And that would be amending a previous resolution.
It's amending what they provided for us today, this first resolution with the 3 bullet points.
We'll add the additional language to rescind that portion of the prior resolution. And I will coordinate that with the treasurer as well.
You have a question, Brad?
Yeah, just a quick one to Supervisor Rossi. I know where you're coming from. I see your frustration. And I before, I believe we added. Well, we've talked about this before, you know, we've been doing this for years, you know. But it's really frustrating when you get these repeat offenders. And like I said, what can we do? But, you know, I believe with there, if, you know, good things happen to bad people, but you have plenty of chances. And what Lexi does and Mike and trying to get them to that last day, once enough, you know, and so you just got to do it and bite the bullet.
On that, all those in favor of the motion as amended, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? 2 opposition, that carries. Thank you, everybody, for the dialogue.
Take people's property.
Make one quick comment now that that vote's done, and it will be quick.
Yeah.
I just wanted the committee to know that in the next 30 days, it's anticipated that there's a potential for an enormous amount of change in this entire area of tax foreclosure. To the point where the Supreme Court in the next 30 days is going to be issuing a decision on this entire concept of what's called in rem actions against property, because we don't initiate this tax foreclosure lawsuit against the individual or individuals. It's against the property, which is called in rem, IN space REM. So the action is against the property, not against the person. And the Supreme Court, quite bluntly right now, is trying to determine whether that is an unconstitutional taking based on a case that comes out of Minnesota. That's part one. Part two, there have been modifications sought to the real property tax law in Albany that appear to be being held towards the end of the session. And some of those changes make drastic revisions to what this committee has seen and what our residents have seen for tax foreclosure in the past. What those are going to be, it's hard to tell. But as over the next 30 days, I think there's going to be a lot more conversation about what this looks like going forward, because it could be a much more liberal, open, forgiving, and difficult process to foreclose on, especially residential properties, for certain individuals, owners who are in certain classes or classifications. I'll keep the committee and the entire board posted as we move forward.
Moving on to the discussion items. I wanted to go right to the posting of foreclosure property since it's relevant to what we just discussed, but we do have a member of the public here to talk about the first item. So I think we'll just keep it in order as we had it.
Okay. So under your discussion items, I have listed a potential sale of Queensbury parcel 303.12-1- 9.3, which is a property in the Golden Arrow Industrial Park, which is out off of Queensbury Avenue. This is property that when it was a whole, the county took it in a tax sale back in 1993. A gentleman has come forward and spoke to me. His name is Nick. I don't want to mispronounce your name, Nick, but Charavelli, I believe.
That's perfect.
And he is here
Patiently here.
and he would be interested in possibly purchasing this property from the county if it is something that we would be considering to sell. He would like to put a business in there. So I don't know how the county feels about selling properties in the industrial park. We've had these properties for a very long time.
These are properties that the EDC used to have the
Yes.
option agreement on it,
Yes.
that expired.
That did expire, so they have not.
We have the ability to sell, and it was in the foreclosure, so we can basically
sell.
have a lot of discretion.
Yes.
Is it? Okay,
Um,
what's it assessed?
currently it is assessed for $112,600. They're saying the full market value is $132,500. I don't know if we would want to ask the whole market value only because it has been so many years that this property has sat and nobody's been interested in it for years and years and years. The county still has 1, 2, 3, 4. We have 4 lots in there, and the EDC, I think, still has 3 lots in there that are all sitting vacant. The only thing that really went in there was the armory that's way in the back here. I don't know. I know.
You guys have any objection to me having this? Share.
Here, I'll give you a little picture that's better. It's this one with the blue box.
Okay, hearing no objections.
So that'd be lot number 8.
It would be subdivision lot number 8, but the tax map number is 303.12-1-9.3. This map, Dennis, that you have in your hand, the 5.99 acres looks like that this was a map that was done by Chase and Company. And so that is the buildable area. Whereas the acreage is really 9.05 acres. So there is only the number that's on there where they say 5.99 that they feel would be buildable.
This is the one in the very back of the cul-de-sac. This is second. Okay. Does everyone see? No? Okay. Yes, Brad?
Is this Nick character of Mills and Aubrey yet?
Stop. I would like to have him come and speak to the committee with us.
Well, what kind of business are you looking in? I also sit on the Queensland Planning Board, so you'd like to come and see me again, so I can be pretty proud. Right behind you.
We'll come in.
I just wanted to, if I could just, if I,
All right.
Chair, if I could just clarify, there's a lot of statements that are being made, but this committee is only the committee for Warren County. It is not the Queensberry Planning Board committee.
Just trying to get an idea of
I just want to make sure that
what he's putting in there if it's viable.
I just want to make sure it's clear that the committee is acting.
Understood.
Before you start, Nick, the chairman has a question.
I have a question. Do we have to declare surplus or do anything like we do with town properties?
The law is pretty clear on this because it was taken through the tax foreclosure process. All that's required is the county could sell it at public auction, or they can merely pass a resolution by weighted vote agreeing to the sale at a specific price. There's no other steps or requirements other than a majority of the board agreeing to terms.
With that, go ahead. You've got our attention.
Thank you. Yes, I've been looking at this property. It's a industrial light commercial zoning location that fits the zoning for the what I would propose is a indoor cultivation cannabis facility for that location, a 30,000 square foot facility, employs about 45 to 50 family members full-time year-round, and also an additional 10 part-time family members. Been working on this for about 2.5 years. I'm a social equity impacted candidate for the state. I've been working with OCM on a mentorship program as well. So I've been working on this project for a couple years as well.
Are you prepared to make us an offer today or
Sure.
not want to put that dollar figure on?
Offer of 115,000. If that's above the assessed amount.
Do I have a motion for? In all seriousness, do we want to entertain a motion today to sell it to this up for 115,000, Dennis? Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, and is the entity that is purchasing the property, is it you personally or is there an entity?
It'll be Prime Arrow LLC. But it'll
That
be
way.
under me.
Another question, would you want to make that contingent upon getting approval from the town of Queensbury?
Sure. I mean,
I'm just, for you, I don't want you to lay out the money, but I mean, not that I don't want the county to have the money, but you know.
yeah, well, I'm, I don't know, if I'm okay to speak.
Well, I'm gonna remind the committee that this is a committee for Warren County. It's not a committee for the town of Queensbury.
I was just looking out for the client, so maybe I stepped my ground, I do apologize, but. Yeah. It's good news.
Craig, I'll come back.
Supervisor McDevitt was,
I will have to,
okay.
my only comment is I'll coordinate with, if there's a motion or a resolution that's approved, I'll coordinate with the potential purchaser on whether it's going to be to a person individually or to a business entity, but that'll be the kind of term my office will take care of.
Can I just?
Let's see, yeah.
So Nick, I believe when you and I have spoken, you did mention that you have already spoken with some members of the town of Queensbury Planning Board. So I think that would be the route that everybody's trying to guide you
Yeah,
is
appreciate that very much.
to go there.
It is industrial light commercial, which
Mhm.
is approval for that use.
Yep.
At that location.
Yeah.
I've had some discussions with the supervisor and the zoning commissioner and steward.
My thought would be that we do
Fair.
not make this deal contingent on his approval. If he wants to buy the lot, he would buy the lot.
Yeah, but why would he buy it if he can't get approval to do it?
Not sure real estate.
Yeah, most.
Representative, not as a real estate attorney.
I
Yes.
think it should.
Yeah,
Right.
thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Isn't there a process and procedure we should take to make sure that this is the best value for the county? Is there supposed to be an appraisal done on this before we just decide, hey, sounds like a good price? Is there a fairness and something that backs us up in all of this? Sure, we can take the assessed value, but I think that's probably at about 80% right now, or or the fair market value.
But that's why I did give you the full market value as well.
So on things like that, why would we accept less than fair market value? Is that, are we doing our job to as stewards of the people's property on all of this?
Lexi, and then I'll,
We have owned this property since 1993, which means we have been paying taxes on this property since then, because this isn't for public use. So we have to pay tax. We're not tax exempt on these.
30 years.
And the EDC was involved with these in when they had the option. I thought it was because they were marketing for us or for the subdivision, and they've never been sold since. And the only one that is one that sits beyond this, the furthest one back in, and that was to the Naval Affairs or the Armory, excuse me. So that's a long time to be paying taxes on something that just sits there and is not being used.
One thing that always amazes me, Madam Chairwoman, is when it comes into real estate, if the county was to buy this property and the person owned it and it was on the books for $132,000, they'd go, county wants it, $260,000. It always gets jacked up. We had property worth $132,000, not worth anything. Let's get rid of it.
I appreciate that, understanding, and that lot 8 is a great size, but I'm not saying as much as, I originally went to the EDC with lot 1 and 2, but then when he showed me the rest of the lots in consideration of the size of the facility, I looked at lot 8 and I think it was more appropriate to go to lot 8, but lot 1 and 2 is also available, but that's to the EDC. I want to have the opportunity to take lot 8 if it's available.
On that note, Jim, would you mind speaking to us about whatever?
Chairwoman, if I can just ask a legal question, is there an agreement still in effect with EDC to market
No,
and sell?
no.
Okay, I
No.
just wanted to make sure there was no agreement. in place.
It ended.
So I think this process can sometimes feel a little confusing. The reason you haven't heard from us here is because we're allowing the business itself to advance it as it sees appropriate, but we have been engaged and helpful to Nick and his business enterprise for quite some time. We've reviewed his business plan extensively. We've done work with the partners that he's or engaged with the partners that he's proposing to work with. We've researched with the state the viability of the business plan. And we've also advised him, as he just shared with you, in a way that we thought was best for him. First of all, as a business venture, that the lot that is ideal for him was not the one that the EDC owned, but the one that the county owned. I want you to understand that we always take this view for any business. We're here as their advocate. You have to decide whether or not you believe this is the right thing that's in the county's interest. We represent the interest of the emerging business. If we believe it to be viable, and we do, then we continue to support them. And in this particular case, this is a use that is consistent with the zoning. It is a business that we believe is well thought out. He's been through a methodical program of over almost a year now of engaging in direct entrepreneurial support with a state-sponsored program. The partners are viable. And beyond this lot, there are other alternatives for him. I believe that this is a ideal lot for him. I also want to share with you, and I appreciate your concern, Supervisor Leggett, about the valuation. This is the most significant and serious inquiry we've had in my tenure at the EDC for this lot. I think it's one thing for us to imagine what we think it could be worth, but the market has clearly spoken over not only the last 2 years, but as Lexi says, the last 30 years. I mean, ultimately, we have to decide whether we want to develop that park. We have a viable candidate here who has what I consider to be a viable business. He clearly has some work to do with the community he's looking to base it in. And he may have some more work to do in terms of an evolving industry. He may have some work to do with the community, but his business plan is solid. This lot is appropriate. And I believe that the county would be well served at the price ranges that have been discussed. It's in alignment with recent appraisals, and it's certainly in alignment with recent purchases in the area. I don't know if there are other questions yet.
Any other questions for Jim? I have a question for Dennis. Dennis, do you or do you not want to give him the condition or the caveat that he can get approval from the town before he closes?
Yeah.
Okay, you will, okay, and Brad.
Second, that,
So it's gonna be contingent, that's the word, contingent on approval from the municipality.
Correct.
Of his business plan or whatever he needs, site plan review.
30 years.
Does he doesn't need any sort of use variance. This isn't allowed use in that lot.
Well, it's certainly our interpretation that it is. I can't speak for the town.
You know what? I did reach out to Craig Brown on that and he did state, hold on, I got multiple little notes there.
Did you want to say something?
I just had a question. Has all the state licensing been acquired? Because if we sell this lot, he doesn't get the license, he can't make the business happen. Then what happens with the lot? Are we gonna buy it back?
No,
Or
we're not gonna buy it back.
No.
A lot, I guess. The state superside, please.
On the complex.
I spoke with, indirect OSM person that the state's decision is that where if the location is zoned for that location, it supersedes any of the other counties or whatever it is. And it's not something that I'm just saying, but the state, the OCM, the way they work is a little bit different with the cannabis business. So.
Yep, what did Craig Brown say?
So Craig said that there was no town conditions on this lot that he knows of. Ag use would fall under this commercial industrial zoning, light commercial industrial zoning. So they call it CLI or commercial light industrial. So that is what Craig did say to me.
Did they pass this is not retail, there won't be sales, because I thought the town passed a law about within 500 feet of such and such, you can't have cannabis retail.
It's completely separate under the statutes for the state of New York. The production is completely separate from the retail operation.
Right.
Okay. And is the town the same way, John, do you know?
The town doesn't have an option. The state law preempts local municipalities except for
On
time,
production?
place and manner on retail. But
Yeah,
on the production side, I don't believe there's any.
the reason I ask is because Supervisor Leggett is pointing out there is a residential neighborhood right there. And the town of Queensberry's rules on time, place and manner may impact.
I'll double check that, but I do not believe there was a delegation to the local municipality for licenses on the production side. Delegation is only on the retail or the.
Okay, okay,
Dispensaries would have that.
okay.
Yeah, that's both, those apartments are rich.
Well, yes, Supervisor Wild.
And I don't think my question is answered. Is all the state licensing been approved for this? This one individual business, because when I was on the IDA, which showed a number of businesses that were inquiring about properties and tax incentives and the like. But they're all conditioned on whether or not the state had approved their license to move forward.
The conditional licenses for cultivation for hemp or indoor greenhouses, they are still actually passing some of those, but for indoor cultivation, they'll use is end of August, probably September in that range. They're going to be issuing 7 licenses: nursery, processing, indoor cultivation, distribution, delivery service, and probably some more dispensaries as well.
So just for clarity, you don't have that.
I don't technically have that license. I'm taking some initiative moving forward.
You, but it makes it easy for survival moving forward with this.
So the only contingency we have though is the municipal approval. All right, I'll call the question on the sale for 115,000 contingent on the buyers obtaining municipal approval of the project. All those in favor?
Aye.
Please say aye.
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 Opposed?
Opposed.
Can I have a hand vote, please? All in favor, please say aye. Opposed? That carries. Thank you. So the county attorney will follow up with you. It also has to pass the full board before it can be approved. Thank you.
Thanks, Dave.
We're running behind on time. Can we skip this next one or no? What about John said? You want. Okay.
Happy spring.
It's fine. I'm good. Just as a brief recap or point of discussion for the committee. The real property director is seeking assistance from the sheriff's office for going to the properties. Because she used to go with the treasurer and now he's not going to be doing that anymore. And especially since he's retiring, it would be good to have her not going by herself. So when she goes to post properties, there'll be a sheriff's officer with her. Somehow we'll figure that out. Right, John? Go ahead, Mr. Taplin.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Just for clarification, Lexi does not go by herself. She and her deputy would go together. What they're asking for is a patrol officer from sheriff goes with them. But that would be overtime. So just for your awareness, at some point, we'll have to move money into the sheriff's account to cover the overtime. We think it'll be about $3,000. We'll figure out where to get it from. We'll bring that back at a later time.
We'll bring it to committee. Okay, Supervisor Leggett.
During COVID, sheriff patrols went, checked on people all the time. They went out for many things. I don't see why we are being charged, but.
Amen.
I agree with you, Supervisor Leggett.
Yeah.
And I think we'll trust this
Yes.
to the administrator to help us figure it out. how, for one department to help another, I think it should.
Thanks, John.
Can I just give a quick update though? As of Monday, there was still 197 parcels that are of property that are in our foreclosure moving forward. So when I go out that first week in June, we go to all of those properties that are still in the foreclosure.
Wow.
Okay. Yep.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. And so it does take a patrol officer off the street to do that for 197 properties. Or we could get a patrol officer who's willing to work overtime to do that. So that's, if we say, okay, the Chief Health Department can help us out, then that's a patrol officer off the street for 197 visits, which could take what, about a couple of weeks?
Now, 1 week, we'll get it done in a week.
Okay,
Thank you.
that's fair concern. Okay, Mr. Alvin?
The next topic is a substantial topic. It will take some time to get through.
Yes.
I defer to the director on whether we push it another month because we do not have a hard deadline coming up anytime this year. But it's certainly something we could address next month and maybe budget an additional 20 or 25 minutes. There's a lot of decisions that are required from this committee and from the board. If we're going to create this partial exemption from real property taxes for volunteer firefighters and EMTs.
Yes, we can definitely.
Okay.
I'm good with bumping it until next month.
All right, why don't we
Time,
move it?
sorry.
We'll make it a discussion item and we'll budget time for it next time. Sure. More time.
Yep.
Okay.
Anything further? Comments from the public? Privilege of the floor? Motion to adjourn. Thank you Supervisor Gerasi, second by Supervisor McDowell. All in favor?